Hi everybody, I'm super happy to be here today, super excited. Now, before we sort of get into the art and investing of emerging markets, I've been in early stage investing for the last 6 years, and one of the things that we're very focused on are founders first. So I thought if we could spend 20 seconds, and I thought if I could get to know each and one of you, we've all just met. I love to just play a little pop quiz game, because I know that when we're having fun, we're more relaxed, we're able to learn better, and it's going to be a huge day for all of you to learn so much content and absorb so much content. So if all the speakers are open to playing this little quiz, it's going to be 20 seconds, rapid fire, and I want you to answer as many questions as you can.
Right,
okay, Daz, are you ready?
Stressful.
Now, they're going to be completely random.
All right.
Okay, so just letting you guys know. So just having a little bit of fun before we deep dive into, the macro trends and risks and opportunities. I want to get to know you first. So, Daz. Okay.
All right.
Question number 1. What color is your toothbrush?
White.
Okay. If you could be any animal, what would you be?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
Come on,
Probably an eagle.
And what's one of the things you would put on your bucket list?
Going skydiving.
Okay. And what's your superhero? If you could be anyone.
Batman.
Who do you admire most in your family?
Who do I
Admire most in your family?
My mother. She raised me, single mother,
Awesome.
fantastic woman.
And what's your favourite summer holiday activity?
Going to Nantucket.
And if you were a movie and it was made about your life, what genre would it be?
Thriller.
And if you could, what's your favourite flavour of ice cream?
I don't like ice cream, actually.
Oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
good. What's your favourite cartoon character and why?
Scooby-Doo. I just like how freaked out he is and, still goes after the thing.
Oh, interesting. And if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
That's a hard one. Morocco's been on my list for a long time, so Morocco it is.
Cool. Morning person or night person?
Night person.
Okay, and what's the strangest thing you've ever eaten?
This is a good one. Monkey brain.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's up there. Okay, last question. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Hardworking, ambitious, and kind of crazy.
Cool. Awesome. Let's give him a clap. That's awesome. All right, Russ. Are you ready?
Shikes. Yes, of course. Thank you.
Okay. If you could trade lives with anyone for a day, who would it be?
Wow, Nelson Mandela.
Okay. And then, so what's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
Like open my eyes? No, okay. Check my phone. It's just right by the side. Yeah.
What's your favorite movie?
Wow. Okay. Not really any, but I like horror, so horror movies. Yeah. I just scare
And
myself, yeah.
if you were invisible, where would you go?
Wow. Okay. If I can be invisible, where would I go?
Yeah.
Okay. The bank vault. Yeah.
Oh.
Oops.
Nice.
And financial maybe? No.
If you were famous, what would you like to be famous for?
Saving the world.
Nice. What's the one thing that you're most afraid of?
That I must what, sorry?
Most afraid of?
Most afraid of? Not trying and not giving my best. Yeah.
Oh, nice. And then what's the most interesting thing you have in your wallet?
Nothing is interesting in my wallet. Yeah. I can show you later.
We've just been talking about privacy issues here. So, okay. All right. And then the last one is, if you could talk to any president in the world, who would you talk to? Which president?
Any person.
President.
President.
Yeah,
wow.
or Prime
okay.
Minister.
I think I'd like to. I've got 2. I like to tap the brains of course, Lee Kuan Yew. So I'm a Singaporean, right?
Yeah.
And who has passed away. And of course, I'd like to find out from Trump what his thoughts are.
Oh, interesting. Cool. Let's give him a big clap. Russ, thank you. All right. Dr. Liu Gang, are you ready?
Where did you get all these questions?
This is our rapid fire questions that we usually...
First time you make me very nervous on stage.
Yeah, well, first time in JB, let's do something different. Okay, so what's your favorite store that you like to shop at, online or offline?
Favorite store?
Yeah.
Well, only online, jd.com. Sorry, not Alibaba.
And if you could be any nationality, including the one that you are now, what would you like to be?
Malaysia.
Oh, okay. Well, nice. Very, very good. What's your least favorite beverage?
My favorite beverage.
Least favorite. Ones that you don't like.
I only do beer, so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because I know nothing about red wines.
What's your favorite book growing up?
The book?
Yep.
The book. The book.
Uh-oh.
That's a hard question because I know Chinese name, but I don't know how to translate in English.
Oh, cool.
Right. Yeah, sorry.
What is one product that you would refuse to promote?
Refuse to promote. Product. The particular product?
Any product.
It's so hard.
All right, pass. Okay. What's your favorite color?
Blue. Blue.
Blue.
Yeah.
And what's the most important advice that you think you've received to date?
Be curious.
Curious?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Last question. If you could teleport anywhere in the world, where'd you want to be teleported to?
Telling?
Teleport. So just, travel to Mars, go anywhere.
Anywhere not on Earth.
Oh, okay. Cool. Thank you. Let's give Dr. Liu Gang a big... All right.
Okay,
So
we'll finish the panel.
Yes. Now we've got another 20 minutes to talk about the art of emerging markets. So let's go macro first. So I'd like to hear from each and every one of you. What do you see as one or two trends in terms of emerging markets? Like where in the world are you seeing are the fastest growing emerging markets? So let's start with you, Daz. You just sort of share some of the mega trends that you've seen, but from a market perspective, what are one or two markets that you're seeing in terms of trending?
So, in terms of emerging markets, if you take the hypothesis that there are countries that will go through the same hockey stick growth curve over a 30-year period that, say, China did, I think those opportunities are in Southeast Asia, Southern Africa, and Latin America, right? So Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Mexico, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, India, and as well as sub-Saharan Africa.
Russ, what about you? What are you seeing in terms of trends?
Yeah, so Southeast Asia for sure, I think the growth has been phenomenal, whether it's in terms of the population size and the infrastructure. I think there's a lot of growth. Right. I think one thing, though, is the political stability within this region. So that's something to consider about. Then, of course, the BRIC countries, BRIC, Brazil, right, Russia, India, and China. I think these four are definitely one of the key areas where growth is, because one of the key things I think growth is powered by is also the digital economy, which I think Das has mentioned earlier as well. So if you look at it, I think political stability, right, accessibility, infrastructure, all these four countries, and increasingly, I believe Southeast Asia, Africa, as well as South America, right? These are the few areas that I think are really hot and rising.
Yeah, I think more the same. I think maybe in next 5 years will be Southeast Asia. Maybe after 5 years, I don't know, maybe India. Then after 10 years, maybe Africa. Yeah.
And if I may add on to it, even sometimes even if there's not a big consumer market, I think the CIS countries are also very interesting. They have a very strong math and science education, and some really great startups have come out of Eastern Europe and former Soviet countries. So that's an area I would like to particularly keep an eye on.
Cool. And then are you seeing any sort of government regulations or schemes in any of these countries that's really assisting with that, direct foreign investment into these emerging markets? Like, are you seeing some of these, are you seeing any of these incentives from governments?
Sure. I think India's done a phenomenal job, especially since 2014. There are strong opinions as to whether or not the government is right for the Indian people, but at least from an encouragement of foreign direct investment, a lot of the red tape has been cut down. In Colombia and Mexico and Brazil, particularly excited about the government's new openness to investors, not just from the United States, but also from China and other places, as well as the emerging regulation in Indonesia and Malaysia and Thailand.
Yeah. So personally, I was based in China for 3 years in Beijing, and then in Laos for 2 years. And one of the key things that I realized is always to start with an SEZ or SEZ, Special Economic Zone, right? And in India for half a year. So from where I've seen, I think it's important to start off with this because it's always a pilot to see whether this would draw the various investors in, right? And in the SDZ, one of the key things is always the infrastructure. You need to make sure that the roads, the basic infrastructure is good because that's when that will draw the talents in. And when you have talents, then you have investors. That's number one. Number two, one of the key policies is the inflow and outflow of money, of currency, right? So in a lot of countries, it's easy to pump in money, but to take it out, it's really tough. So that's one of the key things that investors may be very wary about. So so this will be key things that governments, they have to think about it, and I do believe a lot of consideration has been done.
Yeah, I'm not quite familiar with the policies outside China, but I think even for China, we see that China is like moving very fast in the tech space. But until now, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, we have a new policy basically allow the foreign money to direct into the Chinese companies. After many years, we see that finally kind of open. I would say like in Southeast Asia or anywhere outside, North China, I think you have to welcome the foreign kind of money and to come to the local market to support the local ecosystems. They'll be really speed up the local economies.
And then just on that, you've been presenting a lot about technology and technology being as a scaling enabler, especially with the dot-com and the internet boom. What challenges do you foresee building tech capabilities in each of these sort of growing emerging markets? Like what are some of the opportunities that you think we should start to capitalize on as early stage investors?
Sure. The last 2.5 years, I spent investing across 5 key areas of technology: blockchain, AI, security, IoT, and computing. And I'd like to think that blockchain is sort of on its way down, and the Ripple is doing well, and others, and Tencent and Alibaba will have something. But in general, the idea that blockchain is going to be the solution for all societal problems we face today is a false idea, in my opinion. Having said that, local development of artificial intelligence and cloud computing and data analysis tools are a big enabler for technology in these companies. Universities are starting to do a great job pumping out hundreds of thousands of very talented developers. What they're missing, I think, often, especially in emerging markets, are the quantitative and analytical skills to think through with data and arrive at conclusions and derive insights from data. The particular metrics that you would optimize for in one country are different from the metrics that you would optimize from in a different country. So having that skill set and honing that skill set, which often may happen inside a company, is a very important skill.
And just to follow on what Das mentioned, to zoom out a little bit more, I think increasingly the world is focusing on the SDG, right? The UN, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Right? Increasingly, we're talking about the environment, we're talking about gender equality, about good wages, right? About human rights, about welfare of people. And I do believe that if you zoom out, right, we can use all that I think Das mentioned, whether it's IoT, whether it's artificial intelligence, to help in medical care, to improve people's lives, to better the environment. And at Quest, we believe this is one of the key areas that we'll be gearing into as we move towards the 2020 to 2030, right? Increasingly, whether it's in healthcare. So rather than a specific sector, we believe that eventually a lot of this will converge towards the UN SDG, and this is one of the key areas that we're also focusing on.
Yeah, because I totally agree. I think because now we are 2020 is basically the new decade just start. I think if you look at the past 10 years, we see so many unicorns that really focus on, they're digital from very beginning. All these unicorns across the world. To me, I think maybe for next 10 years, maybe it's start changing is is if you look at all the traditional market, still the loads of traditional market, they are waiting to be digitalized. So that's why I see is, so we see more and more like, people talking about like food tech, talking about like agriculture tech, proper tech, all these, which means, all the traditional market, farming, food, properties, all the traditional, I think they are facing, I think the kind of challenge, also new opportunities. They all be digitalized with the new technologies, the mindset. So I think these are very exciting sectors we are looking at.
If I may add on to my answer, part of what I'm encouraged by is the emergence of the stuff he talked about. There is fintech today, there is insurance today, there's health tech today, insurtech, sorry. About 5 years ago, or even probably longer, it was just tech, right? And we took a very univariate view of the world. Technology will enable X or Y or Z. Today, a multidisciplinary lens is emerging to look at a particular problem, and that's very, very powerful, right? FinTech, which is that, technology-enabled financial services, or TechFin, if you want to think about it the other way.
So just building on that, what do you think, as an investor looking at these emerging markets, are there any industries, verticals or technology that now we should be looking at? You mentioned a little bit about agri, health tech, food tech. Are there any particular, if you were in an early stage, what sectors are you focusing and in which markets? Can you share, have you got some insider quests, what you're looking at?
Definitely. So at Quest Ventures, we invest in early stage startups in the digital tech, but just tech, powered by tech, specifically digital tech. Some of our portfolio include Carousel, Shopback, Caro, 99.co, if you know these companies, right? And increasingly, but what are some of the key things we don't look at, probably because it's not our area of expertise, the deep tech space, right? Like space tech or med tech, if you go into the specifics, right? One of the key things that we are always interested in, if you notice all the names that I mentioned earlier, Carousel, Caro, all these are enablers, right? All these are platform builders. So specifically, we are very interested in platform, right? If you are platform builders, connectors, come and speak with us, because I think that's one of the key things that we look at. Of course, that's not just all, but we find that platform builders, kind of because as you move up the supply chain, you have greater outreach and a higher probability to survive and to scale, right? Because then you touch on a lot of pain points for a lot of people. So that's one of the key areas that we look at.
So first of all, I have to clarify, I'm not an investor. So yeah, because we are more like the platform, but we are more like a observer. So maybe we can answer these questions. So to us, because we are building the kind of ecosystems mainly in China for like many years. I think maybe for the first 5 years, like all the kind of our audience or partners we are talking to, they're all either startups, like startup founders or venture capitalists, the VCs. But in past 2 years, we were surprised that we see more and more corporates, came into our kind of circle. Then we realized that the corporates, like all the big guys, they are kind of desperately, they want to access the startup ecosystems, for different purpose, either investment or partnership or just buy the technologies. So that's why I think to us, we spend more and more times like talking to the corporates. Then I think now, the changes, that's why I said like the food tech or proper tech, I think all this is, if you look at the past 10 years, we see the startups, they can basically working on their own because they are digital, they build everything from scratch, right? But now I think what they change is, if you look at food tech, agriculture, even fintech, the startup, they cannot really, maybe they can start it, but if you want to grow faster, they have to work with big guys because these guys still control the resources, like food, agricultures. So you have to be more collaborative, maybe in the next 10 years if you are working in the sectors.
And so just adding to that, because you mentioned about corporate innovation, and there's going to be a whole topic around corporate innovation capital. Can you share some of the stuff that you've been doing with, like, you know, BMW? Like, what's the role of these corporates, like, in this space, and what can they really do to supercharge, you know, in these emerging markets? Like, what do you see is an opportunity for these corporates to get involved?
Well, in China, we started working with the corporates. Actually, the corporates come from really diverse sectors. Like we work with BMW, they are really interested in basically the car related, auto driving, all these technologies. And we are working with like the group called Fun Group, that are based in Hong Kong. They have been running the logistic business for over 150 years, but now they are looking at the blockchain technologies, because that will be very helpful for tracking all the logistic, basically the path. And we're also working with even like Unilever and many others. But these corporates, I would say, it's hard to tell. Well, they have different purpose, and also the speed of accessing the innovation systems is also very different. Like some of the corporates, they have their own incubators. Like basically they're talking to the startups directly in different way, even the investment, partnership. But some other corporate, they are moving relatively slow. They are more looking at the marketing purpose, right? Because they want to tell basically the big boss, say, hey, we need access, we need to talk to startups, but they don't know how in future. They don't know how to do the investment. There are, basically there are lots of know-how they don't really know. But if you look at the incubators, for example, like for BMW, because they have an incubator called Startup Garage, but it's not a really physical space, but it's more like a virtual incubator. But basically they want to talk to the startups which have technology. Then the incubator build the kind of shortcut and to their manufacturer department. So this with a good technology, then BMW guys, they're going to bring the startups directly talking to the manufacturers, then try to implement the technologies into the next car. So it's really diverse. Yeah.
If I may add on to the previous question and this combined, so part of what I think a theme should be and is emerging is investing in the plumbing and the enabling layers of the internet. Yesterday we saw Plaid getting acquired by Visa, right? And Plaid is a plumbing technology that enables American consumers to connect to their financial institutions, and similar plumbing enabling technologies for value layers to emerge at right above them is a very important theme that I think needs to emerge. Oftentimes, for example, the needs and requirements of emerging markets are not particularly met by the American-based cloud companies or the China-based cloud companies, and so establishing local data centers, establishing local clouds, and making sure that data localization is met is a particularly interesting and emerging topic. And in terms of corporates engaging, a lot of times they act as strategic investors and making sure that it's, pardon my win-win, but making sure it's a win-win situation where the company wins, the corporate still gets the value, is an important trend, I think.
And Russ, what can you share with us in terms of insights to any sort of programs that you've been working with? I know that you've been, based out of Laos and doing work in Cambodia. Can you share what are some of the programs that you think are accelerating in some of these emerging markets?
Right. So, of course, I think solutions are always country-based, right? Based on the needs of the country, based on the needs of the situation. Just a quick example, in Singapore, we are increasingly seeing a lot in the solutions for the elderly, right, and mental health as well as education. And if you look at it, it correlates with the needs of Singapore. Right? We are an aging population, a graying population. Case in point, based on last year's statistics, 600,000 elderly in Singapore, and projected to go up to 700,000 by end of 2030. And increasingly also in Singapore, unfortunately, more and more youths are committing suicide. Last year, I think there were like 21 cases. So mental health is definitely one key area as well. And then, of course, education we are very focused on. So likewise, depending on which country that you look at, is always based on the needs of the country, and then whether from there you can spin out into other places, right? That's why I think one of the key layer is how well educated or how good the infrastructure is. Right? So if I look at Southeast Asia as an example, so based in Laos, it's still very, it's a developing country, right? And because the population size is not big, there's only about 10 million people, and the size of Laos is 400 times the size of Singapore. So it's very sparsely populated, right? The capital itself, Vientiane, has only about 1 million, right? So if you look at it, for an accelerator or program to grow, it has to be very specific and to zoom specifically into what Laos has. So Laos has a lot of waterfalls, a lot of dams, right? So in terms of energy, potentially, I do believe there is an accelerator that's looking into that, right? And also the other thing is agri-tech. I think we mentioned about that. But if you look at it, then are the talents able to meet that? So not to dismiss the education there, I think it's great, it's growing. It's just that I think in terms of, they do need a lot of foreign support in that sense, right? Whether it's to inculcate that into the youths, and also to see beyond what Laos can bring. Right, so very quickly also, one of the key projects that I was involved in was to help to look at how, I think that was 10 years ago, how Laos could be the battery of Southeast Asia, right? Because so when the Mekong River flows into Laos, about 4,000 cubic meters, but when it flows out of Laos, it's 12,000 cubic meters, meaning to say that the outflow was fed a lot by the underwater ground springs and the rivers from the mountains and so on, right? So that's why you see increasingly, you've been following a bit of like you've been paying some attention to the Mekong River region, the Mekong region. You find that increasingly there's a lot of dams being built there. Of course, then that leads to another problem, right? Where it's the ecosystem. That's another side of the story. And where there's problem, there's always solution, and where there's solution, there is opportunity. So it's just how we want to weave all this into one whole ecosystem.
Cool, thank you for that. So let's just open it up to the floor. We've got some questions here on Slido. So let's go to the first one, and any of you can jump in and answer these ones. How do you see Johor startups should leverage on Singapore market and the key success factors?
Well, I'll start, even though I might not be the most knowledgeable on the topic.
Okay.
But I think of, let's say, Johor as similar to Kansas City, where I did the startup, right? It's sort of an emerging area. There's a little bit of tech, but it's not the epicenter of tech in the region. And oftentimes, going global sooner is a particularly winnable strategy. When you go global sooner rather than later, and you learn from one market and you transfer those learnings, and you can do experiments in a different market, you can grow much faster because you're not constraining yourself to a particular problem in a particular geography. So I think go global as soon as possible and learn in a less risky market and transfer those to a bigger markets as you go.
Cool. Russ, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. In fact, not just Johor startups, but I like to say Malaysian startups as a whole, right? Because I do believe our demographics are very similar and our focus. So just last week, I was talking to a startup in KL, and they're looking for investment, and it's into the education space. So I think it's amazing what they have thought of, because I haven't seen that in the Singapore side at all, and it is primed for a global markets, not just Singapore-based. So rather than, I'll phrase this question as, how can Malaysian startups leverage on Singapore ecosystem? Because if you set up, if you set up a company as, let's say you're a Malaysian startup, you set up a company in Singapore, I think that can give you access to whether it's grants and funding from Singapore, and we are seeing it increasingly from Southeast Asia, from China, from a lot of other countries that have set up specifically a company in Singapore so that they have access to a lot of other grants and programs that we have. So I'll use that as a case point.
Yeah, I would say maybe this not just apply to the Johor startups. I think it's applied to maybe all the startups. First of all, I think the no market is really small market, because I would say we're always looking at the global. If you look at global, even you have no matter if you have 10 million population or 5 million populations, if you look at global, the whole world is either potential is the market for you. So, so therefore the second, I think, to me, when we talk about emerging market, we have to look at the local, because it has to be local, which meaning you have to understand what you have in the local market. You cannot, I think, take China as the examples. I think first maybe the first 5 years we copy everything from Silicon Valley, but if you look at the 2 years, in past 2 or 3 years, all the Chinese unicorns, they don't really have the benchmark, and with Silicon Valley anymore, because first when we started, everybody telling you, okay, what I'm doing is like the China version of Facebook, China version of Twitter. Then they're all successful. But if you look at what we have now in the past 2 or 3 years, the company like DJI, the company like even like Erlang, like all the new unicorns, they belong kind of, they have their own Chinese ecosystem now because we are looking at the local market. I think the same thing will happen in the South Asia as well. Maybe now it's time to look at the China, because the mindset, the philosophy, the business models, they're also learned from China. But maybe in the next 3 or 5 years, you have to understand, okay, what do you have, kind of uniqueness you have, then you can bring that to the global market.
Okay, one final question. There's quite a few there. Okay, looks like weed's got a few more there. So weed is expected to be legal in Malaysia for medical purposes. Oh, it's moving. How can I create, I can't see that, a joint venture between Southeast Asia countries to enter this sector? So I think AIM, for those who know, I think runs a cannabis accelerator program. So he's a bit of an expert on this topic, but do you have any insights into what could be the opportunity there?
I'll just jump in first, right? So weed is legal in Malaysia. I'm not sure. Is it true? Okay, expect that. Okay, and then but I do believe it has medical purposes, no doubt about that. So of course, then again, we spoke about the regulations in the different countries. I don't foresee that being legal in Singapore. And I think one of the questions that was asked earlier was, are there some of the things that you won't invest in or invest on? So at Quest, we're very clear we will not invest in anything that has to do with gambling, right, into drugs. By drugs, I meant recreational drugs, not medical drugs, right? And of course, some of the things like weaponry and stuff, right? So these are some of the key things. So coming back to that, then that's my answer for you. If it is not recognized in a country's regulation, then we will not go into it because that will have a lot of implications after that.
Okay, one final question. So this is a blue sky questions for each and very rapid fire again. If you were a founder and, no time constraints, no capital constraints, to start a business in Johor Bahru, what would you start?
I would, that's a hard question because I'll answer with what I'm doing. I think what I'm doing right now could be done in Johor Bahru. I'd start a privacy-enabled by cryptography venture.
Awesome.
Wow, amazing. For me, it's definitely always to do with impact and sustainability, right? Poverty eradication, anything to do with the SDG, it's right up my alley.
To me, maybe buy some property, then sell it. No, I'm joking. Yeah, that's more practical. Yeah, because I'm the community guys, platform guys. But seriously, I think that's the purpose why we're here for like BaseConf, because I think to boom the technology, the ecosystems here, we need platforms. So to me, I'll be, that would be great if we can do something here to build a platform together, then bridge the, Johor ecosystem with the global, with China.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.